Welcome back to the Daily Dose of Dopamine. My name is Robert, here with Jan, visiting professor from the University of Oslo in Norway. And we're talking all things superheroes right now. And in the Day One program, for those of you who are fans of cinema therapy and what we do, we are going to, our next class we're going to be offering is Deadpool, which is like a what? How could you do this for something for the Parkinson's community? Well, Deadpool has an interesting origin story, and I wonder what do you either recall or what do you find interesting about Deadpool? And by the way, if you don't, that's totally okay too. About his role, because like Tony Stark, he was not a main tier hero either. He was, kind of an outsider.
Yeah, and that's very interesting characters. I mean, the origin is an illness, right? He seeks therapy for life-threatening illness, and with that, he enters into the typical superhero situation of gaining superhuman powers, but also, with some unwanted side effects. And that makes him, I guess, a classical character in that mode. Whereas the films have become as successful as they have been, I guess, because there's this continual mode of referencing that framework, making fun of it, parodying it, making the stereotypes obvious to the viewer, breaking the fourth wall, and so on. Of course, that's typical of superhero films in this sort of very, very late postmodern stage, but I guess that character does it better than most of them.
Yeah, and Ryan Reynolds deserves credit. Like he seems the perfect fit for the Merc with a mouth. The idea of just absolutely, in a meta analytical way, destroying everything that MCU has built, and in doing so, making it even larger. What I mentioned at the end of the last episode is where I want to dive into a little bit, and see maybe where this plays in disability is, Deadpool says that this is a love story. He tells us that in the voiceover right at the beginning. And again, that's a shocking idea with the violence, the gratuity, everything that goes on. But the truth is that that's the reason he lives, is for Vanessa. How do you feel about the idea of love in disability and maybe superheroes, kind of that crossroad, and how it's portrayed in Deadpool?
Hmm. I guess the most interesting thing to me is that you can use these tropes and you can use these frameworks to tell pretty much any story you want. So saying that it's a love story is, I guess, it's a claim. It's a way of choosing what discourse you want those tropes to enter into. Whether it is a love story, I'm not so sure about that, but it's an interesting claim to make.
Yeah, I agree, and this is where Deadpool may be an unreliable narrator, right? He can tell us it's that, but we can kind of go, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bromance.
Yeah, yes. I mean, the silliest things that happen along the way between all the male characters, his driving force is for the damsel in distress that he's left behind because he's abandoned her, right? And the story's told in a an outside in type of way, right? So all of those things come to pass. Superheroes now, I mean, going back to Iron Man for a minute, Tony Stark, I think his redemption too comes to his love story as well. That's what humanizes him even more than, trying to fix maybe what he destroyed by selling all the arms and creating the arms. It's with the love and the repair of his heart, spiritually.
Yeah. Well, of course, it also ends in sacrifice and death, which is a typical ending for a disability story. A good death, a deserving death, a happy death. That's the classical way to end these arcs.
Well, and there's something in that too, which is maybe the denial of death completely, right? There's the idea that none of us probably, at least in the US, talk enough about death to recognize it's part of the natural cycle of life. The idea that we're going to live and we're going to be healthy, and it's just not true. We're all going to get sick and we're all going to die. But to see a superhero, like you said, live and die a good death, as it were, a sacrificial death, something that served the larger means, that hits a lot of heartstrokes. I think a lot of people would want that, the idea that their life somehow goes on in a positive way when they leave.
Yeah, and brings with it all these problems about which lives do we consider sacrificable.
Hmm. Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about that. Now, what is that? You're going to open up something much bigger than we have time for. I'm going to leave that one alone. Um, Last thing, and I hope I don't open up anything too big right here. You're in the US, you've been in the US before, and yet you are Norwegian, and that's where you live most of your life. How do stories differ between culturally in Norway and here in the US? Do you have kind of a broad view of that? How
Well, I mean, the stories are bigger here. That's, I think, the main distinction. Some of the themes reappear in Norway, but we are by this point so heavily influenced by American popular culture that it's very hard to tell at this point.
I'll leave you with this. My favorite film of all time is The Shawshank Redemption. And I actually was over in Norway, and I really love when I go to another country to see a film there, to see how the audiences react to it. And what I remember was seeing the audience, I felt like they responded with more humor to some of the darker elements. And this is just one audience, mind you, so very small sample size. That I thought, gosh, this seems shocking to me, and yet they're laughing about it. And it wasn't that they didn't enjoy it, but it was a different type of reaction. Do you have
Yeah,
any
no, I
feel
think
for that?
that sounds about right. I think the U.S. prison system, the reality of that is not as close to a Norwegian audience. So that would probably inform their viewing.
Understood. Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's a whole other thing, the U.S. prison system. Well, Jan, I can't thank you enough for your time. I do hope we'll get to meet up in person now that we're relatively close over your sabbatical. And by all means, don't be a stranger. Reach out. Okay.
Yeah, great talking to you.
You too, Jan. You take care.